We're live.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to both the Podwans podcast and the Voices of Arda podcast. How's everyone doing today?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. I'm joined here with Luke, as well as Pete or Belmont from Voices of Arda, and Nick, ND Wise Guy. We're here to talk about the greatest show on earth. Why is Halbrand so hot all the time?
AKA how Sauron has a stranglehold over everyone.
Oh my God.
This whole fandom.
It's like, here at Podwans, we're very much into Star Wars, and so we're very much off of the Kylo Ren is the hottest guy ever made, and then he was usurped by Chimere from the Acolyte as the hottest guy, and now we have Halbrand returning as Anatar, and continues to be hot. Like, even with the long flowing blonde locks, like, there was something about this scruff, grizzled look of Halbrand that was like appealing, but it's like, now that he's cleaned up and he's nice, like, I still like him. But that being said, the first 3 episodes of Rings of Power did air this week. I had a great time watching them. I ended up watching all of season 1 with my partner, who has only seen Fellowship of the Ring. So we went through all of season 1 again. There are so many things I forgot happened in season 1. Like, most of the main plot points stayed with me, but I was like, oh yeah, I forgot all about these people. But watching episodes 1 through 3, which they dropped all at the same time of season 2, I was pleasantly surprised. As someone who's not a huge Tolkien head, and like, my girlfriend's asking me like, who's that person? I'm like, I know they exist. That's for sure. They are involved in Lord of the Rings. That's where it ends for me. I'm sure you 3 have a lot more knowledge going on than I do. But as someone who's just a novice in this field, I am loving the show. I loved season 1, and I'm loving season 2. How do we collectively feel about season 2, and even season 2 over season 1, now that we've kind of had some changes made based on feedback from the first season? Pete, I'll start with you. How do you feel about it?
I personally think it's like been night and day compared to the first season, because there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes with season 1, with like the Celebrimbor actor changing and them doing reshoots, and just overall the story changing, because initially it was supposed to revolve around Celebrimbor from the start. But the second season has really come very high point with, snappier dialogue, really deep lore references, which is something, as a Tolkien nerd and big fan that, being a content creator, I love, because you'll hear things that are one-offs and one-lines within the books be referenced, and it's just like crazy to hear. But overall, with the flow of the story and the pacing, it's probably the biggest change for me, where, like I said at the start of this, it's very choppy, but now it feels very fluid. We have a focal point to our season, as well as our story being Sauron and the creation of the ring. So it's exciting to see that finally be, realized, I suppose.
Yeah, that's something I did notice, is that I didn't have an issue with the dialogue in the first season, but this season, and maybe it's just a matter of these actors are now more comfortable in their roles, and they kind of understand how each character works with another, especially like newer characters. I'm not going to name anyone, because someone's just going to yell at me like, actually, on page 37 of the Silmarillion. I was like, but like, characters that, I think there was one interaction, we can talk about it later, but the interaction with Theo and Arondir after the funeral, that I was like, this is good. I like how they're interacting now. And obviously there's a lot of hostility there, but it feels like they're all like, they're getting into their costumes easier, and they're delivering their lines easier. And I did notice that a lot. And it's really cool to see just the growth of, these characters as well as the actors. Nick, how did you feel episodes 1 through 3?
I really enjoyed it. I'm in the same situation as you. I am not a Tolkien head. I very much attempted the Fellowship of the Rings and the books in high school and did not get very far. During the live stream, I learned a lot between Pete and Callie and Luke as to what was going on. I remember specifically when Círdan was about to make his appearance, and the three of them were all extremely excited. And I believe I said, "I'm glad you're all excited. I don't know who's coming, but I'm glad
Don't know who
you're
that
all
is."
excited." And then,
I
of
will
course-
say this: can you raise your mic volume a little bit? Is that something you can do? Because you're a little quiet.
How's that? Is that better?
A little
Did I
bit
make it
better.
worse?
If you could go a little bit more,
Is that better?
a little bit more.
Yeah. How about that?
That sounds good to me.
There we go. And it was funny because when Círdan came on screen, my first thought was, "Hey, it's the Admiral from Rogue One who blows up in his X-wing over Scarif."
Yeah.
Which of course is an entirely normal thing to do when watching an entirely different franchise. No, I really enjoyed it. I agree with Pete. It felt a lot more fluid. It felt like everyone, not just from the cast, but also the crew, the writing felt much more comfortable in the world that they had set up in season 1. And it created, I think, some really good, dramatic, almost like I don't want to say standoffs, but like moments between, like you mentioned, with Theo and Arondir. And I think even with Celebrimbor and Sauron / Anatar, when Anatar took his form, like it just felt much more emotionally invested than what I got through parts of season 1.
Yeah, I would make the argument that the one group of characters in season 1 that felt natural together and delivered their lines perfectly from like the jump of season 1 was Disa Durin and Elrond. That to me was the star of the show in season 1, and like them like just clicking right back into it has been like I love that aspect of the show. Like Disa is like probably my favorite character in the show. I love her so much. Just every line she delivers, it just has just this confidence to it, and she's like naturally hilarious. And just the way that she talks with when she talks with the king, I was like, oh, this is so good. I love her so much. But she's great. Like I love her so much. But Luke, how are we feeling with the first 3 episodes of Rings of Power?
Oh, I feel fantastic. I think it's great. I think there's a lot that we can talk about for sure. I think the number one is that first episode was that first 20-ish minutes felt like season 1. It felt a lot of, obviously they were telling the backstory of Sauron. We get the connection to Adar and everything like that, like their relationship. So that was interesting. Seeing the new guy play Adar was interesting.
Yeah.
I really, really, really enjoyed that. So nothing but good things in my opinion for season 2 so far.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can definitely fill me in on some like either lore reasons or behind the scenes reasons, but Adar was recast. And I assume the actress who played Bronwyn, it just did not come back.
She stepped away from acting in general.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Because that was she was another like highlight of season 1. Is I really loved her, and I loved her relationship with Arondir. And like when the funeral is happening, I was like, no. I was just like, I was sad on multiple reasons because I loved Bronwyn as a character, but I was like, I just wanted to like I was like, I wonder what happened, because she was great. She delivered an amazing performance last season. But
I found it interesting how they like kind of had her go, because it's actually this really deep lore reference to the
it was something about the arrows and
yeah.
I don't know if it's the way they're forged or if they're coated in a way.
Well, in the books, it's known that orc arrows are poisonous.
Okay.
2 individuals have been poisoned and have gone through kind of something like that. The first is Celebrian, the daughter of Galadriel, who is the wife of Elrond. The reason why she's not in the books, but her sons and daughter are Arwen and the twin sons of Elrond, is because she's in Valinor. She leaves because she can't deal with the pain that the wounds caused. The other time is a deeper First Age reference with someone getting like having a poisonous javelin thrown at them, and initially it just seems like a flesh wound, but then it finds out later it's poisoned, and her name's it doesn't matter. But she ends up dying in the night. So it's another one of those deep lore references, which is my point being very common in these first 3 episodes, which differ a lot from the first season, is they are adapting portions of the Silmarillion without outright saying they're adapting them, which is a huge high point for me. So yeah, I really enjoyed how they did that whole like funeral scene and everything like that too.
Yeah, I mean, not to like shift this to Star Wars, but it feels like kind of the way you're describing it is the way that the expanded universe has made its way into the Star Wars canon. Of like, you're not getting Dash Rendar and Kyle Katarn, but Cassian Andor is using Kyle Katarn's blaster. And it's just these little things like, no, we're not directly pulling, you know, scenes or elements from the Silmarillion or other references. It's just, but we're going to talk about it. And like you said, like at the orc arrows being poisoned, it's just like, I think that even not knowing it, it's like, that seems like, even from someone who's like, before watching this, I did not know that orc arrows were poisonous. It's like, oh, okay, cool. That makes sense. And even from a show standpoint, like when they did the recap of that episode and you just see Bronwyn like with the arrows, I'm like, this seems like they're showing this for a very particular reason, and it's probably not going to be good.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was lots of moments, even like when from my limited knowledge, when we see Isildur again and he's in the spider cave, and I'm like, is this? I don't know the timeline. Is this either Shelob or Ungoliant? Like, what are we gonna get? I was hoping for sexy Shelob from Shadow of Mordor, but you know, one can dream.
One could dream. That game brought in a weird thing where it had a lot of people convinced that like Maiar, who are those like higher spirits that exist, could all shapeshift, but it's actually very specific to Sauron. Sauron is known as the shapeshifter and the one who's able to do that. And there's a long-winded explanation, but I actually love the spider scenes. Isildur is one of my favorite characters in the whole show. I'm glad to see him in a new light than, you know, say for example the movies and how they treat Isildur, because in the text he does a lot. We'll put it that way. He does a lot, especially with like around the time of Numenor and what ends up happening there and the War of the Last Alliance. So it's cool to see him in a different light. I think the actor really does well with him. But the spider thing creeped me out. The whole like parallel they had with Alien with the face hugger coming out almost was like, I thought that was pretty well done. And I'm excited to see what they do with it. Shelob's so tiny if that's supposed to be her. And that was my only complaint. I was like, why is the spider so tiny?
Yeah. I was like, when I saw that there was a bigger spider and it wasn't an enormous spider, it was just bigger than the ones we were seeing. I was like, that probably isn't her. And I feel like they would give her moment, if that makes sense. But no, I love that scene. I think we've seen that type of scene in fiction so many times of like the giant spider lair. And I think, you know, credit to the special effects team. I think those spiders were creepy. Like, I mean, the one that just like bit the dude's head off or the orc's head off. And I was like, whoa. Usually it's just, you got like punctured by big fangs and now you're gonna die of slow poison, like it happens in every element of fantasy fiction. It's like, no, these guys are just eating. Okay. So yeah, I thought that was a great scene. I thought it was, because like I knew, you know, it's like I knew who Isildur was, and you know, just from the movies and reading the first book, I was like, he's the guy that screwed everything up, so he obviously has to live. And it was just one of those things that, like, I thought that was a cool and creative way to pull him out of the Southlands, you know, before it became Mordor. And it's like, he looked like he got crushed by burning wood. And I think that's one of those things of like, how do you come back from that? And it's like, okay, he was pulled in, you know, he was pulled in by spiders that were feeding on the remains of that battle. And okay, that works. And I don't think that like season one, from an outside perspective, I don't see all the egregious points of season one, particularly where it's like, oh yeah, this doesn't make sense. But I'm like, okay, this guy has to live. How are you going to get him out of this situation? And I think seeing it in season two in a cool and creative way is really great to see.
And it's lore accurate. You know, the spiders being there is a huge part where, like, Cirith Ungol, where Shelob is in the Two Towers or in the Return of the King in the movies, that tower is built by the Numenorians. It's built by men, and they know that there's that thing up there, and you know, Sauron is fully aware as well. So really interesting fact to have Isildur, who will end up building a location there, having it be his first contact. I thought it was really well done to help like tie in that deep lore references and like make sure that they're staying accurate to it, which a lot of people complained about from season 1.
Yeah, like I feel like there's again, we're only 3 episodes in, or is it another 8 episodes, or are they doing a longer season?
5.
I believe it's 8
It's
episodes.
another. Yeah,
Okay.
it's another. Yeah, 8, but we have 5 left. So we'll have 4 weeks, 4 more weeks of show left, which is real depressing because I think it deserves 12 episodes. But I mean, that first episode really comes in like not even. It's just it pushes the envelope forward again. Because I mean, I feel like season 1 did a really good job of setting up the plot and getting everything going. But I mean, when you give us hot Sauron, like that's gonna bring numbers. Come on,
Yeah.
like it is. Like Charlie Vickers is a handsome guy.
Yes.
And the guy
100%.
who played him prior to that
Black Loudon?
also. Yes.
Middle
was
middle
fantastic.
manager Sauron.
I saw your comment on TikTok. Middle management Sauron is the
I mean,
best.
there's a segment on TikTok I know of, and our friends are in that segment that would agree that the million dark tendrils of Sauron was his hottest form.
Oh, good
So-
God.
It's
Well, like,
true.
okay,
there
so, like-
there have definitely been comments. I've seen those
so, like-
comments.
So, like, talking about that, that part of the episode was like, it just goes to show you that Sauron really cannot be defeated until like the destroying of the ring, and even then, Belmont, it's hinted at that he's never really truly gone anyway.
No, he doesn't like that. That's one of the craziest parts. He just loses his power, and he's like, I believe it's stated that he's like a memory of malice, is how he's described in the book. Once the ring's destroyed, because he pours all of his power into that.
Yes.
Before that, it's crazy to watch him because there's been times where Sauron's gone and done like battle with someone else or been involved in a story prior to the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, and he's changed form and he's had to flee and like he's done similar things where he's had to transform into a bat and like he's transformed into a werewolf. It's a very wild story, but it's cool to see it now on screen where it's like it shows how he can just shapeshift and change forms. It's like this disgusting liquid, but if you listen to him right when they're really putting work on him, he's chanting something to himself, and
Yes,
he's
he's
as
using
if to
black
like
speech.
yeah, he's using black speech to almost like possess his own blood and then like seep through the world. It's weird, but I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that opening, I guess, the opening scene of episode 1 where it is the him talking to the orcs is a different character, and when I first watched it, I was like, okay, he's in the promotional material, he's in the trailer. Did I miss something along the way?
No.
Because it says Dawn of the Second Age at there, and I'm just like, I was still like, oh, where in the Second Age are we? Like, this has to be taking place before.
The very, very beginning. It's almost the end. It's like when Morgoth gets captured.
Yeah,
So the final time.
When it didn't take very long for it to click to me. Like once you see the black blood and stuff like that, I was like, okay, it's starting to shape. And then when he gets the person in the wagon, and obviously just the sound design of that scene, and now you don't see anything. Oh, it's like, okay, all right. And then obviously he becomes
like,
hot, and that's where his power comes from. How attractive he is.
The blob star, you could hear it breathing. It's gross. And then like before that, if you noticed, they try to show the amount of time he's been down there, because if you look at when the initial puddle drops down there to when it like grabs the rat, the stalagmites have grown like incredibly tall around him. Yeah. So it's supposed to be like hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of years that he's been like in wait. And that was cool fact.
Yeah,
I like
and I think like in season 1 when Halbrand is confronting Adar and he's like, you don't remember me. And it just kind of adds a little bit more to that. And I'm sure there's lore stuff in there, but I was like, just from like a connection thing and seeing like how far that went back, and you're seeing why he says that line. I thought that was really cool. And but yeah, it's just, I think it's very interesting because I think season 2 very much feels like a season 2. It is, we established everything we wanted to establish in season 1. There, it was very clear there was feedback, like even from like people that I know that are big Tolkien people, and like it's like, we like the show, we have comments.
Yes.
And I think, you know, not to dive in, like we do it a lot on our podcast where we dive into a lot of the culture surrounding the fandom and stuff like that. There has been a very, very loud, obnoxious part of the fandom that has been talking about season 1, and I'm sure at this point season 2. But I think this is a great example of like, you can make something and it not 100% live up to fans' expectations, and listen to feedback and grow from that and take that into a positive direction. I think we've seen that time and time again. I think everyone's favorite example is the first season of The Office and the first season of Parks and Recreation.
Oh wow, yeah.
Where it's like, not that it's bad television, right? It's just that there were weak points of that show, and as the show is allowed to grow, you can address those weak points. You can take those things, you can take characters that people didn't like, or people that had problems with, and you can grow those characters. You don't have to kill them off, you don't have to fire them. It's just like, people didn't like this, let's find a way to get people to like you, or to like this aspect of the show. And I've heard a lot of positive things about season 2. And again, I've seen people that are already, there was another dark-skinned elf.
Oh geez, there were a shit ton of them in that. And
and it's like,
and they looked awesome,
and they look great. Gil-galad,
amazing.
Also,
but he's
by
singing
the way,
in the whole.
Can we talk about
scene?
Yeah, that I loved that part. That part for me was just so great. But also, like, we haven't even touched on Elrond in this, like in these 3 episodes. Elrond is a standout in these 3 episodes, particularly because we talked about this on the watch party. Yeah, he's right to a point, but in all reality, like, he's also wrong. And I think it's so compelling of a like, he, like, deep down he wants to do good, but he doesn't know if he's willing to go to take what it, he has what it takes to do it, right? He's got this moral line, and he just doesn't know if he wants to cross that line. And I love that for his character, because it is very much, he's being very, very cautious, and so is Durin, which is also another big thing as well, because I felt like the dwarves last season was some of the best storylines. And oh my goodness.
Yeah, when Prince Durin talks to his father, the king, and he says, when the apology is happening, when he says, I don't trust this, you know, like, I am not sure that this is going to be the solution, but based on your own guidance and your own counsel, I think we do actually need to do this, where it's like, you know, this is a we're going to have to, you know, cross that shrouded veil and see what happens. Otherwise, our people are going to starve. You know, we can die from doing this, or we can die of starvation, or we can have that glimmer of hope. And I really like Elrond's character in this season, because I feel like, now, I loved Elrond in season 1. I loved his unbelievably charming nature in season 1, where it's just everything he said, you were like, this is the nicest elf, and this is an elf who is like grounded in reality. His best friend is a dwarf, and even when he's, you know, being insulted by his best friend, he has a way to just spin that into a positive thing, and always he brings a smile to both Disa and Durin's faces, like, every single time. But now in this season 2, where he's been through a lot, and things are not going well, and he's scared not only for his people but for his friends. And I think he has this hesitation, and this is kind of a little bit of prequelitis. He can't stop this from happening. These rings have to get made.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a cool exploration of his character, you know, because we have 2 different Elrons, or 3 different Elrons. We meet the first age Elrond, who's a child, and what he goes through. We meet the second age Elrond, who we're being introduced to now, and then we have the third age Elrond, who we know who is kind of summer and a lore master and a healer, and that's how he's described. And he's very, you know, steady in his approaches, and very like has foresight, looking like the different tasks and endeavors these individuals have to do, from the Hobbit to the Fellowship of the Ring. But it's cool to see him here, where it's like back to what Luke said. He's both right and wrong. Like, he's right to fear these rings. He's wrong to be so willing to throw them away and pretty much doom all of Elvendom. But it's him growing into this individual that we're going to know who's going to make the right choices, or be able to, state the right choices and be like, 9 is the right to go against like the 9 ring wraiths, and like, have that foresight. I love that, like with the show, how it's kind of pivoting now, where it doesn't feel like Galadriel, as much as I love her character, is the main character. You get a little of Sauron and Halbrand. You get a little bit of, Elrond.
It's more of an ensemble.
Yes, exactly. And it's starting to feel like a fellowship, like.
And it didn't feel rushed. I think like that was something that I noticed through the first 3 episodes, is we spent significant time with all of the main groups, whether it was Numenor, whether it was the Stranger and Poppy and Nori, but it felt like you got significant time with them to see where it is they have gone in the time intervening between season 1 and season 2.
Yeah.
And I agree with Elrond. Like, Elrond, to me, when I watched the episodes again, I almost saw streaks of Galadriel in him, in kind of his devotion to not wanting to use the rings, like that sort of almost stubbornness to know, really, I am right and you're going to do what I'm going to do what is right, which was very much Galadriel's journey through a big part of season 1. And I think that speaks to the level of friendship and impact that they've had on each other, that on the other side of that coin, you have Galadriel being able to admit that she cannot go and find or be near Halbrand again alone, because she understands the impact, which I don't think season 1 Galadriel ever would have admitted. So to kind of see that growth and that, to see that growth and that sort of impact that the two of them have had on each other was really cool to see through those first 3 episodes.
Elrond, like when she goes to find Elrond on this like mission to Eregion, and he's like, and she's talking about Halbrand, and he like looks at her, he's like, not Halbrand, Sauron. And it's like that moment. I love that. I love that aspect where it shows you the flashback of Halbrand and Galadriel sitting there. It's because she is like completely manipulated by this idea where she doesn't even see him as Sauron. She sees him as Halbrand, this person she went to battle with, this king in the Southlands who was supposed to be your friend. And she's like, I know his mind. I know Halbrand's mind. He's like, Sauron, like, get it through your head.
Snap out of it, woman.
That scene really stuck out to me, because he's carving away at the wood and he's building a boat. And he's helping the I can't remember his name. The guy
Círdan, the shipwright.
Yeah, he's helping him, and we see him very much hands-on again, because it was, again, another standout part of season 1 was that first encounter where they're smashing rocks together as the competition. And Elrond in this show is a very hands-on person. Yep. And I like that he essentially, until that moment you said, like that's not Halbrand, that's Sauron, he doesn't really back away from the boat. And he is just focused, and like she is secondary in that room to what he's doing, until he's like, you are so far gone in this, and I'm going to stop what I'm doing. And even when she's leaving, he doesn't look away from that boat, even when she walks out the door, until he hears that door close. And that's when he looks away. And I was like, that scene to me just stuck out, because he's clearly fed up with how things are being done amongst the elves, and just how like his best friends are not listening. They would have listened in season 1. They would have listened to him, and they went to him, and they wanted to use him
in season 1. Because if you remember, he's like not invited to like the first Private Lords meeting, and the way Gil-galad talks to him, he calls him Elrond Perethel, because he's the half elven, because his father, and like, his line is Eärendil, and it's Elwing. Both lines, all the houses of the Edain, all the houses of the elves, and even like from Melian and Maya's blood in there. That's why his line's so important. So like to say that to him, even a king, like, because he's next in line as king. Elrond, if Gil-galad were to perish at that moment, Elrond would be the next king. He just chooses not to be, because the Lindon, after the Battle of the Last Alliance, there's pretty much not enough people to even have a kingdom anymore, and he chooses to stay a Lord of Imladris, Rivendell. So it's cool to see that. Like, that's to your point, you're seeing this Elrond who's fed up with like constantly having to go through these individuals and be told like you're not involved, you don't know what you're doing. This is above of what you're doing
Yeah.
here. Which she says something like that during the waterfall scene. Like this is like
Gil-galad literally goes, "This is above your privilege."
yeah, exactly. And it's like wow, because this is Eärendil's son. This isn't like some schmuck elf who working on a boat. This is Eärendil pretty much saved everybody. The world.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting. Well, it's not interesting. I mean, it's obviously the first choice, but the fact that he goes to Círdan, and a little backstory on Círdan. Círdan was, Pete, and you can correct me whenever I make a mistake here. Círdan was one of the original elves to wake up. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's
There's
like 3 groups that awake there.
Yeah, and he stays. Like the other 2 groups go to Valinor. Correct? Or is it one other group?
It's so there's a lot of groups. It's called the Great Journey, and they're all like the Eldar. They're referred to as.
Yeah.
And like the Eldar all go, and there's 3 groups that go across the seas of 3 different like elf types. He stays behind because his leader at the time, the person that he was following, disappeared, and that's Eluthingle, the king of Doriath. He disappears in Nan Elmouth for like 150 years. It's very random. And so he chilled. So he like learns how to make boats, like from the Valar and stuff. But he always longs to go to Valinor. That's his whole like backstory.
Mm-hmm.
So he also is really good with shaving with a shell.
Yeah, by the way, that's incredible.
Knives? Who needs knives or blades
knives?
or razors? I have
It's just like
it's an elven skill. But the funny thing for me is like in the show, and even when you said like, oh, there's a group of the Eldar, and the only Eldar I know of is from Warhammer, and they're wildly different.
But that's funny you bring that up because the Eldar, like the elves in the first stage, were wild in how they acted. They were violent. They killed each other. They went to war like on a snap. They're like, "What did you say?" They will fight. Like they were disrespectful to men. They were really wilding out. That's the best way to say it. They were wilding out. And so, like you hear in the Eldar, all those names come from Tolkien. All that stuff is straight out of his own books. Where like even most of D&D is based off of this guy's books now, and almost every other fantasy world has some deep lore reference to it. But take for example, you guys watch House of the Dragon, right? You you watch season 2.
I have not. I think Nick has, but I
have.
But there's the brother, the other brother of Aemond
Allison?
and everyone.
Oh, okay,
okay. Daeron.
Yeah.
And then you hear this name brought up by Círdan in like the second episode. It's like Daeron and Rumil. Well, Daeron is like this really well-known minstrel that's like this deep lore reference. And I actually made a video about this, but like him referencing Rumil and Daeron, these are the 2 individuals who made like the main languages that we are exposed to in Lord of the Rings, like the Kirith runes, the runes on like the map in the Hobbit, and then like the Tangwar is the writing on the outside of like the Door of Durin, and it's the writing on the One Ring as well. Rumil made the precursor to Tangwar. It's called Surati. So it's like this is what I'm saying. I know I'm going a little bit of a spiral or
keep going
spiral here.
Yeah,
but like that's the stuff that they're doing in this show now. Where in the first season we were like getting some of it, but now the second season they've obviously been able to push it a little. Where like because they have a direct relationship with the Tolkien estate. Unlike the movies are work with an entity known as the Middle Earth Enterprises, which Tolkien himself sold the rights for the movies back in the 60s. They had to sue them to get royalties. There's a bad relationship. So we're seeing now like Anatar, that name is not in Lord of the Rings. That's strictly the Silmarillion and like Unfinished Tales. So they're working with the estate to slowly get small tidbits from the Silmarillion. Armenelos, never mentioned in the Lord of the Rings. That is the capital of Numenor. That gets brought up too. So it's like, but it's a constant battle. I had a chance to speak to some of the showrunners about it in San Diego Comic-Con because they did the One Ring party, and they say it's a constant battle, legal battle to even like get specific rights to specific terms, even something like the Blue Wizards. So it's cool to see how they've gotten around it and how they're still interweaving this world because Chase, you said something about the characters feeling more like they're in their like own shoes, like they feel like their own characters now, not like really forced. Well, this feels like now a story of characters who exist in Middle Earth, like not just in some what others were complaining about, some almost generic fantasy world, or at least they try to label it as so.
Yeah, like there was a great video, and this is totally not Lord of the Rings related, but there's a great TikTok video I saw and reposted from Jason Pargin, the guy who wrote John Dies at the End.
Yeah.
And he was talking about a lot of the stuff with Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon and George R. R. Martin, and he was like, once anything is adapted, it has to become its own thing, like, because Tyrion from the book is Tyrion from the book. Tyrion in Game of Thrones is Peter Dinklage playing Tyrion, and you have to play to Peter Dinklage's strengths. You can't just say, no, Peter Dinklage, Tyrion from the books wouldn't do this, and Peter Dinklage is, well, I don't do that, and that's not in my acting repertoire, and you hired me to do this. And as these characters go on, and I think a lot of the actors we're seeing that are playing these characters, we know, like kind of to reiterate, is it's like there are strengths to these actors. Let's play to their strengths so we have a better piece of media overall. And I think it's on the showrunners to like find that fine edge of like, where do we lean into the actor versus where do we stick to the source material? And it is a balancing act, 100%. And I think with my very limited knowledge, I think season 2, they are getting closer to that balance. For me, they found that balance, and I'm sure for a lot of people who are more like you or deeply in the north, you may feel different on that. But like,
it's been
pretty
like positive from everyone. Just as someone who's like constantly out there, like on Threads or Instagram or TikTok or what have you, it's super positive. Everyone is loving the show. And my favorite thing to see nowadays is like, oh, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm really enjoying the Rings of Power. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people saying that or like seeing
that's great
written on Twitter or like Threads or something like that. So it's definitely working. And I got to ask you though, like, do you find yourself more interested in the lore of the Lord of the Rings watching this show?
I will. Okay, I'm going to compare Lord of the Rings to One Piece right now.
Oh, brutal.
Okay.
Not that they have anything to do with each other. It's just that there are pieces of media and franchises that are so vast, it feels like, that it's like, I am 100% fine dipping my toes in with something like Rings of Power. And I've watched the extended editions of the trilogy like multiple times. I love those movies. I have read The Hobbit and I have read Fellowship. It's in the very back of my mind of like, I should read Two Towers and Return of the King and the Silmarillion at some point. But because I know that these are such dense like pieces of cultural history, I mean, at this point, that I'm like, I don't feel an urge to. It's not that I'm like discouraged from doing it in any way. It's just like, I know that it's so large and it would be such an undertaking to get through all of it. And there's franchises out there that are way, way more built up at this point than Lord of the Rings is. I mean, Marvel and Star Wars are just impossibly large at this point.
Very interchangeable. Like you could have Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man 2099. You could have Miles Morales Spider-Man. You could have different alternate universes to that Spider-Man. So that makes sense. I think I'm happy with your answer though, because it really should feel self-contained. Because you open up that bucket, and next thing you know, you're dipping your toes into an ocean of Tolkien, and it's too much. Like reading the books, and all of a sudden, like you have to remember this guy's name, Garulf, whose horse is Hasselfell, being the horse that's referenced in like the movie and all that. And you wouldn't know that, but like I know that because I've read the books. No one cares about that. But it's good to see like in the show. My point being is that the show has really been like, hey, let's pick and choose what we expose here. Where like I could tell you a quick fact about Círdan or something, but you don't have to hear the whole story of the Awakening of the Elves.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. Like, I guess I'm not like against diving deep into Tolkien's universe. Like, but it is. I think you put it great. This show feels so self-contained that you can be happy with what it is, and it is an opening. If you do get that itch, like I need to know that little tiny fact about Círdan. I have to know, so I'm going to read everything. But I'm not there. But I'm also like, there's so many franchises out there. There's so many universes to dive into. Like I still need to catch up on like the Expanse novellas that I've like just been putting off, and I'm like, That there's and it's a new franchise that's become so big.
Yeah, I think like this show is really, it's accessible. Like I said, I'm not by any means a big Tolkien fan. You know, I think we talked about it on the live reaction last week. You know, he's a great writer. He's just not a great writer for me, in terms of what I like to read. But I have enjoyed the balance of, like you've said, like the deep lore references that add to the experience for those who are really deep into the lore. Whereas I'll sit here and go, "Oh, that's great, that's cool." Where of course for like Pete and Luke and Callie on the live stream was like, "Oh, this is amazing," but it doesn't handcuff you. You don't need to know the parts of the Silmarillion to enjoy the show and enjoy the characterizations in the story, and that's, I think, especially with adapted works, that becomes a really big balancing act. To your point, Chase, about making it so that you're touching on the story, but you're also leaning into what your actors are good at to give that accessibility. And I think that the first 3 episodes did a really good job, even above and beyond what season 1 did.
Yeah, I think maybe the best way that I could put this this is a really cool feeling for me watching this show, and then coming on here and talking to you and Luke, who know so much about this universe. Is I feel like the people I talk to about Star Wars, because when I watch a new Star Wars show, I get 99% of the references. When I see like Starkiller's helmet in the back of Andor, like, oh, it's Starkiller's helmet. Like it, or just these things when someone gets brought up and it's just this teeny tiny minor character, and I'm like, oh, I know that reference. I know that character. I know this weapon. I know this planet. I know all this stuff. And then now it's so interesting to have this outside perspective of just like, I am not watching this, and I am not like, my eyes aren't darting around every frame that's on screen where I'm just like,
you're focusing on what you should be focusing on.
And that was very much my experience with season 1.
Not saying that Pete and I don't watch exactly what we're supposed to watch. It's just
right, but
our eyes catch
you
a
have
lot
that
more
moment
detail.
of like when the little jangly keys off in the distance, you're like, I know.
Like
that.
here's
What
something
did you say?
when in the second episode, when like they do the moon runes, the Ethildine, that writing that you see on, like, dude, it actually says something. And like I was like, oh, that looks like Quentin. It says, I believe it says Elbereth, which is this term used in the books for the goddess of the stars. Her name's Varda, but they call her Elbereth in like Middle Earth. And I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, someone like picked it out and just like spelled out like, hey, check this out. And I was just like, what the fuck?
That's how I am with RFH and Star Wars. Where they have like the store signs, and I'm like, that says milk.
Yeah, and I mean, and the other kind of detail is like Círdan talking about the Valar, like just straight up talking about the Valar, like
Manwë, dropping the name Manwë, King of Arda, King of the Valar, the gods of Middle Earth.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't even touched on Numenor. And I think
we also haven't touched on the stranger.
Oh yeah,
and Poppy.
Well, I will say this:
Maury.
When Poppy showed up, oh my god, I lost my mind. I was so happy.
I was like, really like that storyline. I can't believe people say like, oh, I don't like the Harfoots. They didn't like it in the first season. I'm like,
I didn't vibe with it in the first season, but now I do. Like
I love the Harfoots. When Sadak dies in the last episode, I was sad in the first episode. I mean, first season, but rewatching, I was like, oh,
it was sad.
God, he dies.
But how do you hate joyful foragers that sing songs as they're traveling? I just don't. No. But I mean, that there were people who, when they watched season 1, who hated the Harfoot storyline. I was like, why?
For me, like, again, I'm not in this universe deep, but like that's the Hobbit. Like, what do you not like your own franchise? What is going on?
So let me get a little nerdy with you. So in the books, when we have Samwise and Frodo in Aragorn, and they're going through like the swampy areas, and they're trying to get over to like Weathertop, and after Weathertop, they go through this really like swampy area near Bree, and there's this bug there. They're called Neekerbreekers, and they're called Neekerbreekers for the sound. They can make this Neekerbreeker sound. That's what Samwise calls them. And while you're watching this show, you see the stranger. He's like pushing their thing as they're going on their journey. And this dude they're in a swamp area. He's straight up fighting Neekerbreekers off of him. And I'm just like, what? like it's such a deep lore reference that it would go over anyone's head, but it was just so wonderful to see. Just like the look on his face of pure hatred of these bugs. I was like, all right, that's wonderful. I love it.
And the fact
that
they go ahead, Jason.
I was saying the thing about the Harfoots that I liked was just how they spoke, and they had essentially a rhyme or a saying for everyday conversation, and it was always like an interesting thing. And even if you didn't understand like the reference, if they like brought up like a certain type of animal that they referenced, like you understand and related to the reference. And when they would have some type of like lesson to give another Harfoot, it's like you relate to it, even if it sounds like they're almost speaking gibberish. And like I really liked, I think them and the dwarves, just the way they speak is just so interesting. It feels very fantastical and whimsical, but at the same time very relatable and very personable.
It's very Hobbitish too, because Bilbo is known for doing poems. Samwise has a song, the Troll Song, which is actually, if you listen to the Troll Song in the books and the Ballad of Damrod, they have lines from each other. They take lines from that. But also, you know, Frodo sings in the Prancing Pony in the books when he falls off and the ring falls on his finger, and also like sings a bath song and all this other stuff. So they're constantly singing. It's a huge part of Hobbit culture to sing and tell poems. So it's just, it feels natural to me to see Harfoots doing this.
Well, and also Wandering Day, there's a line that says, "Not all who wander are lost," and that's from one of the letters it's the letter that Gandalf gives the innkeeper, and he's talking about Aragorn. He's like, you gotta trust him. Like he's not all they aren't as not everything is as it seems.
Exactly. And Bilbo wrote that. He wrote that poem. That's his. So when they're in the Council of Elrond in the books, Bilbo is there because he's Bilbo the Renowned in the books. He's everyone loves him. He's like top dog, and he's there. And like Boromir is pretty much being Boromir, where he's like, you know, there is no King of Gondor. Like, who is this ranger from the north? And he just like gets up and he does the poem. He's like, not all that who are wander are lost. Not all that is glitters is gold. And like seek for the broken sword. I forget the whole poem, but he talks about the broken sword, roots that go deep, and all this different stuff, talking about Aragorn's line. So it's cool that like you right there bring this up, because there's a deep level of culture to Hobbit life. There's the three original tribes who we're meeting, which are the Harfoots, the Stores, and the Followhides. And we're about to meet the Stores apparently this season too.
Yes.
And they are wandering. They're called the Wandering Days. That is literally the term Tolkien uses for the time prior to the Hobbits eventually settling in the Shire and what we know as like the modern Hobbit, we'll call them. But yeah, so it's cool. It's like they're really like building it in, like. But, you know, how do you expect anyone to know that as just like a normal viewer? That's the tough part. I think they had trouble with in the first season.
Yeah. I also do like that the stranger is a full-on speaking role now.
Yes. It doesn't make it as tough, I think.
You know, I didn't hate him not being able to communicate and Nori finding ways to relate to him in the first season. Like I do think that their relationship in the first season, and it's a very tumultuous relationship in an interesting way, but I think the fact that he's found his voice, and it's one of those, he's an interesting character because he's definitely a character of guidance and like he's almost a mentor that's still learning in a lot of ways, and he has to learn from the hobbits. Like when he's like finally admitting that he's lost, and Poppy comes along and she's like, no, it's the song. You need to pay attention to the song. The song guides you through this area. And it's like, we know that this stranger is very wise and very knowledgeable, and there's a lot of stuff going on in his head that we're not privy to at this point. But he's also still in this learning phase. He's, you know, whether he's learning or relearning everything. I really like that part of it. And again, you brought it up, like Poppy being back here. I was like, I love Poppy.
Love Poppy.
Poppy's gonna
Poppy-
die.
Pop-
No,
I'm
Poppy
fuck
is
off.
the
very
best.
strongly
Don't
like
you
Poppy's
dare
gonna
put that
die.
in the
No,
universe.
no,
Don't you
absolutely
dare.
not. Absolutely not. No, but here's the other thing though. Okay, so we set up, right? So we set up the two wizards. I think they're blue wizards.
I like to think they're not going to be called Blue Wizards, but I think they're
No,
going to
they
be called
won't be.
Wizards. They may
But they
make
will
up
be.
names.
So I think one, because everybody thinks, and this is what I said during the watch party. Is that Sauron? Saruman? Is that Saruman? I'm like, it's too early. One, two. They want you to think it's Saruman and Gandalf by the way that the actors look so similar to younger versions of Christopher Lee
Yes.
and Ian McKellen.
Yeah.
But it to me this screams blue wizards because because Tolkien talks about how the blue wizards, and I think it was an unfinished tales he talks about.
Yeah,
there's two
a
different
letter
stories
and
for them.
unfinished tales, and then their histories. But he goes through different iterations. The thing about Tolkien,
Yes.
that's why you can never say anything's canon, because it's like, well, were you
No,
talking
like-
to Tolkien in 1920? You talking to Tolkien in 1951? What about
Yeah,
Tolkien in 1971 when he was like at the end of his days writing like all sorts of crazy shit?
Yeah,
You can't
he's
decide.
like that, and that's the thing. Like nothing is canon. Like the only thing that is canon in all reality are the Hobbit, the three Lord of the Rings books, and the Silmarillion. Everything else,
That's-
fan fiction.
The
In a way.
Silmarillion is pushing it too, because
Yes.
Christopher Tolkien and a gentleman named Guy actually pieced together the last portions of that story. That's why it's like certain portions of the Silmarillion that feel really weird because they feel out of place because it wasn't incomplete. Such as
Yep.
Turin Turambar. It's an incomplete story.
Yep.
I was going to say something else. So with the wizards, here's the thing. I'm like in a 70%. I'm 70% there to say that it's probably going to end up being Gandalf. The reason why is because the familiarity.
Yeah.
We all know the character. They're being very on the nose about a lot of stuff, like the Gandry
Yes.
line. That's a Norse word. Like in Gandalf's from the Poetic Edda. It's from Norse mythology. A lot of the dwarf names in Thorin's company are also from there. Gandalf means staff elf, wand elf, is what it literally translates to. So them saying, well, we need to find a Gand, or it's like very. But I also feel like they could just be doing this intentionally to make you feel like this is Gandalf, just subvert it and flip it on its head on you.
Like even
What
like
if they're
the
reversed? What if the stranger is Saruman and the long-haired wizard's Gandalf?
That'd be
That would be
wild. It'd be
interesting.
wild.
But I mean, like even like for me, and my memory of the movies is hazy. I'll admit it. But even like the way that the stranger physically moves, his gait, the way he walks, it very strongly reminds me of how Ian McKellen moved, especially through Rivendell in Fellowship.
Yeah.
Like I would be shocked if it's not Gandalf.
I think Pete's right. Like at the end of the day, this is a show that needs to
Be
make
familiar.
and draw people in. And I could see if they do it in a creative enough way where it doesn't have to be Gandalf and it can still be good. But I think at the end of the day, like it's the same reason Grogu will never die.
I mean, this dude came
he is
flying
living
in on a
peacefully somewhere.
meteorite, so like anything goes now. All right,
Yeah,
because that is not Tolkien.
What I want to know, and I'm going to use Chase's words from your guys' pre-episode or pre-premiere episode, is how is the Cantina band going to screw this up?
I think we're seeing Bombadil. Not this episode, but I think next episode for sure.
No, this coming episode, they came out with a clip already showing.
Is it Tommy?
So
we get Tommy
next episode.
Oh God, damn it!
So I have this ongoing theory based off the first 3 episodes that everything we've seen in the trailer up until this point in the trailers that were released are going to be the first 4 episodes. So like we're probably gonna see Barrow Whites at some point. We're probably gonna see Stores because we've seen them now. We're gonna probably meet Tom Bombadil. But I just want to jump back to this whole wizard thing because it's bugging me out. Like, what if these wizards are just not wizards either, and like it ends up being something completely different? Like, which is like it'd be crazy.
He's said to be an Istar.
Yeah, I know.
What is that not a you can tell me, is that not a wizard?
That's a term, yeah. That means Istari. That's what their order is called, the Istari, the Order of Wizards.
Yep.
So.
And they're not like what Gandalf looks like in Middle Earth is not actually what he looks like in reality. It's just
He's
a form he
embodied, like,
takes. Yeah.
he's sent by the Valar from, like, because he's like, I'm gonna tell you
In a
something really
way,
crazy.
he's like Jesus, and he's in a
Balrogs,
way like he's like
no,
Jill.
no, no, no,
Yeah,
let's not go that far.
Balrogs and Gandalf are like closer related.
The same level of spirit. So it's all pretty much power levels. There's higher and lesser spirit, but they're all referred to as the Ainur, the holy ones. And the higher, more powerful spirits ended up being the Valar, and those lessers were the Maiar. Some of those Maiar end up being Balrogs. Others become like Arian and like the sun, and they're like the sun themselves, and they're pushing it. Or some end up being people like Elorien, who are very wise and were there with the elves when they first arose. Elorien is chosen by the Valar to embody mortal flesh, a mortal form, as old men to go and help fight against Sauron. That's their exact purpose. So Elorien becomes Gandalf, and he becomes this old man, but in truth, he's like older than time. So
All right, Nick. Let the people know where we can find you. Also, you'll be on for tomorrow as well.
I
correct?
will not be on for tomorrow.
Oh yeah, that's
unfortunately,
right.
'cause
That's right.
Yes, my kid's soccer starts tomorrow.
Soccer.
Yeah,
We'll take your spot then.
Who
That's
needs
quite all
kids,
right.
Nick? Just abandon them and neglect them.
Good Lord.
I would, but I also agreed to coach this year. So if I abandoned one, I would be abandoning 10. So that might get me in some
they
trouble.
can figure it out. No.
Yeah, they're the new fellowship. They'll get it.
Here's some balls. Have fun. No, the good people can find me on TikTok and Twitter, and I'm trying to get more onto Threads to get myself out of Twitter at NDWiseGuy. I primarily like to talk about Star Wars. I'm talking about Outlaws these days, as well as the High Republic. So if you're interested, feel free to go follow. And it's been a joy as always, gentlemen. And
bully
I look
him
forward to seeing
into
you.
reading the Silmarillion.
Yes, so it's there. It's in my Audible now. I've got the Andy Serkis version. I am in the middle of Beware the Nameless, the latest High Republic book. So I'm going to finish that first. And Kel's bullied me into reading the Heroes of Olympus series, so I don't really want to disappoint Kel's, as you can imagine.
That's fair.
Anyways.
That's fair. Good to see you. We'll talk to you later.
Too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. So now it's only 3 white men instead of 4.
Hey.
So it's I mean, in I love that we're getting different perspectives. I loved reacting to it with Nick, and I like hearing Chase's perspective as well, because okay, the way it goes like Belmont, Dawn, New Beta, Callie, like everyone on Talking TikTok, and then there's me. I would like to say that I'm knowledgeable, but I am not. Like, I tour.
There's like
it's a whole nother level with that.
So in between the movies and the books, where like
Yes.
you end up finding yourself sometimes.
Yep,
I'm still there at times and stuff.
That's where I'm at, but it's like I love getting new, and this is something that I wanted to do originally with the podcast, is bring in different perspectives on fandoms that I love. And I do really love that. Now let's get into Numenor, and then we'll round off with the dwarves, because we haven't really talked a ton of the dwarves nor Numenor.
A little bit, but yeah, we haven't like gone deep into the mountains of the dwarves.
Yeah, let's which one do we want to go for? Do we want to go Numenor?
Let's start with the dwarves, man. Then
dwarves.
We want to talk about this stone people, you know?
Oh, and I found that interesting. I find it so interesting of how they are able to take the story that Tolkien writes about how because we don't know a ton about the dwarves in this age. There's some that is told.
There's some snippets here. So the dwarves we see in Khazad-dûm are known as the Longbeards, Durin's folk. They're like the most prominent group of the 7 tribes of the dwarves, because there's 7 of them. 2 existed in the first age. That whole continent went into the sea. Those 2 mingled with Khazad-dûm and enriched it, because they brought all their techniques. Those are the broad beams and the firebeards. And that's kind of where you get that red hair too, I guess they're trying to say in like some of the adaptations. That's where they're trying to represent. So the Khazad-dûm we're seeing is actually Khazad-dûm at its peak. This is the best version of Khazad-dûm before it's known as Moria, which Moria is pretty much like a dark pit. That's what it translates to. It's like so it's not a good name. It's a name given to it after the Balrog awakes. So what we're seeing here is like we have Khazad-dûm at its best. They have gardens, they have merchants, they have selling,
Yes.
and they have markets. It's a very vibrant place. Something I never thought I would see in a show where, like, the first season, I thought Khazad-dûm was one of the highlights of the whole show. I was like, holy shit, that was amazing. They have elevators. Okay. But like, and then like to watch them, and then they develop now, it's even further. But I know you brought Disa, Chase, but for me, the one standout role is the King Durin III. I just love the actor, and I love the way they've done it, and like the way he speaks from this season. Like, he had some of the best lines in the first season, and just to see how he's now developed into the second season, where we're seeing a relationship develop with Celebrimbor, and like we're gonna see all that play out. It's like pinnacle Tolkien going on here. Like we're eating well.
Yeah, I feel like in even not even just for the dwarves, but like in general, the show's writing, at least dialogue, has been spot on. I mean, there's some times where I'll be like, oh, okay, that's a choice, but like it's like for the most part, it's been pretty Tolkien-esque, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about this show is that we had all these characters established to us, and we kind of understood what they were about, and more or less like their stance on the things going on in the world. And now that the world is literally changing around them with with Mordor coming about and stuff like that, like there are certain principles, especially what you see with the dwarves, there are principles that will have to change, and kind of like that very, very strong stance. And, they have this whole conversation about stubbornness between King Doran and Prince Doran, and they're now going to have to break that. And I think there's some really good, cool metaphors and like visual stuff about like breaking rocks and the things that Disa says to him about splitting rocks. And they're literally having to just split their personalities and crack into themselves to overcome what's happening to Middle Earth. And I think I agree with you. The way that King Doran delivers his lines, the way he talks to his son, the way he talked to Disa, where it's like, is that all you came for? Is there nothing else? And stuff like that. Yeah. Don't make me say this. Don't make me ask. I think that a lot of the stuff that they're doing with him is great, because he's a character that, like, you see in a lot of fantasy stuff, like these stubborn for their people kings, they end up being ruthless and evil. And he's very much not that. He very much cares for his people, and he will do anything for his people, and he wants to protect them. But he's not ruthless. He's not about to go on a rampage to keep people away from the mountains.
He's not wrong.
Cares. Yeah.
He's not wrong when he talks about like the fate of the elves are not for us to determine. It's for wiser minds to decide.
Well, and even that, it's just like you kind of empathize with, like, why should I grant another person immortality? Like what do I get? You don't think I want to live like that? Why am I going to break my back and sacrifice dwarven lives so that another group of people could live forever? Maybe they should live the way the rest of us do. And like where you kind of like, the elves, who they are, and you have this established thing, it's like with Star Wars, we'll say the characters in Star Wars haven't seen Star Wars, and the characters in the Lord of the Rings haven't seen the Lord of the Rings. Yeah. So you have to put yourself in their shoes. And I think they do a great job with King Durin of like, even though what's going to happen and what the right decision is at the end of the day, you understand his stance 100%. And
absolutely.
I think they do such a good job. And I think they did a good job with it in season 1, but the way that everything is changing in season 2 and everyone has to make decisions they don't want to make, it's so interesting how they present these challenges to these characters and how these characters overcome these obstacles. And like King Doran is doing a really awesome job. And it's cool to see him, come out of his shell. Like seeing him with Celebrimbor is like, he's out of the mountain. Like we've seen Prince Doran out of the mountain, but we haven't seen King Doran, and it's like he's there. in he's in a region. He goes to a region, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's
Yep.
like he traveled there to deal with this.
The dwarves are actually in the Lord of the Rings really spiritual. They're like really spiritual. They talk about Mahal, and that's something they talked about in the first season. Reference it. Mahal is Aule, this Valar who pretty much brought the mountains up, and like they rose because of his work, and like he provided gold and minerals, and like he did, that was all his doing. And so they worked, like it stated that when the dwarves and everything comes undone, like they're supposed to go with Aule and rebuild the world with him. So it's like cool to hear them like talk about that in that way, where it's like, you know, they talk about the mountain spirit, and like they talk about these aspects of, you know, the fire burning in Durin when he's a child, and like that's when he knew that he was a dwarf king of old. And it's cool that they keep that going, that same like revelry and that same like kind of tonality to their approach, because they are a deeply, like they are an old, deeply spiritual race of Middle Earth, one that are steadfast and stubborn, where it's stated even in the first age, like they're on battle, they just fought this dragon and their leader Azagol is defeated. Like these dwarves came out like in a funeral procession and picked their lord up, and it stated that no one would challenge them why they did it, because they were so frightening to witness and like so powerful, because they were covered in like these iron masks, and like they could withstand like dragon fire. They were a wild race, to the point where Galadriel in the books is like, this is the greatest fighting group in Middle Earth. She says that like verbatim, was like, this is it, this is the gang. So seeing them build into that, because I'm waiting for them to get to that point, but seeing how they're like, where the bones of that foundation are starting to be laid down in season 2, especially in just like the small amount we're seeing, is fantastic. But what about Durin talking to Anatar? Like, what did you guys think of that?
I loved how he was not willing to back down with him, and I think he's talking to Decent when he says it. He says, "I don't trust him. Elrond would never say anything so nice about me."
Yeah.
Where it's like he doesn't know Elrond. Like I know, at least like I know Elrond. Like he's like, he doesn't trust him.
He would never call me wise. Like,
yeah. And it's one of those things. It's like, what I did love about Elrond in the first season is that while he would never lie to you, right? And that's a huge aspect of Elrond's character in season 1, is he's very, very true to his word, and he doesn't want, like, the biggest conflict he has is, do I break my friend's trust or do I save my people? And he struggles with that. And I think that's a great character like choice.
Oaths are really important in Tolkien. Super important. You know, oaths are not to be broken, and it's a reoccurring theme. And I'm curious if they're going to stick with it. I'm super curious if the showrunners are going to be like, you know what, we're really going to push it that far.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, like, while Elrond would never say that Durin is a stubborn jerk and he's just, every time I go there, it's just a hassle, he would never say that. Even if he thinks it, he would never say that, because he loves and cares, and he views him very much, they view each other very much as brothers. And it's like, again, he's not going to say, he's not going to lie. He doesn't believe that Durin is a wise dwarf. He thinks he's a smart and capable dwarf, but he wouldn't use the term wise. And Durin knows that that's not how Elrond views him, and it's not a matter of disrespect. It's just, that's just the matter of the situation. And having
they say it to each other, though. They're like, you're like an elf, and he's like, you act like a dwarf lord of old. Like the stuff, like the references there are numerous, but to your point, like he would never call him like, you're so wise and like wise beyond your, you never say that to him. You'd be like, Durin, you're acting up again, like chill out. Like they would talk to each other very real, and like,
it'd be like, you're a pain in the ass, but a pain in the ass I would endure every day of my life.
The funniest line, what is the funniest line for the first season from Durin? Give me the meat and give it to me raw. Like, it's like what that is, the relationship.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
Well, like, even, I mean, you have these great, and that's why it was my favorite part of season 1, was like when they're digging through when they're trying to find the mithril, and Elrond is like, I was winded at the competition, and he finds out he just threw the match, and it's just like, it's just one of those things, like they're very much brothers. They're, when you think of like siblings, and how they're siblings that love each other, but they will do everything they can to get under each other's skin. But there is a respect and a love there. And I think that interaction with Anatar, and how Durin is just like, okay, dude, yeah, sure. Elrond called me wise, bet.
Yeah.
Whatever, dude.
But kind of
That
going.
Cal brings up a really good point in chat, and like, Callie's like, if the dwarves had resistance to the ring, which it stated they do, it only made them greedier and more like
Self-centered.
self-centered, and they almost like focused on their own kingdoms. Wouldn't they be able to withstand Sauron's charm too? And I would believe yes. I don't think when the seven rings are handed out in the books, it's a very straightforward thing. I could imagine it being sent to these lords as it would through emissaries of Sauron rather than Sauron himself handing them out. Because the difference in the books is Celebrimbor and Sauron, when they make the 19 rings, because there's 20 in total with the one ring, the 19 are meant for the elves, wholly for the elves. And it's not until Celebrimbor betrays Sauron in his own eyes, where he hides like the three after he creates the one ring, and that's why he attacks Eregion, that he hands these rings out to seven lords of the dwarves and the nine men that end up being the Nazgul. So it's like that's the only thing that's different. But I actually love this change in the show, because there is that line that people love to use with Rings of Power, how like, evil can only mock, it can't create. That whole thing they tried arguing. Well, you're seeing it right here in the second season. Sauron absorbing those creatures, and like the rat and the person, not being able to take his own form but copying someone else's, or this aspect of like the three elven rings being created first. Well, the rings are no longer Sauron's idea at first. He's now copying the elves. And it's the same kind of idea here, where it's like, instead of it being for the elves, now it's for the dwarves and the men. And it's like he's gotten this idea that he can control these people through watching the elven rings be made by Celebrimbor. It's no longer his idea at all. And I think it's super important, because that is a theme we see with Tolkien a lot. The subcreation, the idea of creation within his world, how creation works. Morgoth couldn't create. Sauron can't either.
Well, the one thing, and maybe it's lore breaking, I don't know, but in season 1, you have Galadriel saying, like, I know that while it may have been Sauron's idea, these rings are untouched by Sauron. Like, these were made solely by Celebrimbor. He had, Sauron had left Eregion by the time that these were actually forged with her brother's dagger. But now you have these 7 rings for the dwarves, and that last thing you see is Sauron reaching his hand out to Celebrimbor and says, "Let me put the mithril in," and he holds it for a second.
He's chanting some
and it's
words.
just like this. These are Sauron's rings, and then he drops the mithril in, and it's like me and my girlfriend were watching. They're like, "Oh, you fucked up."
Yeah, like you fucked up, exactly. But I love that, and I know a lot of people disagree. Like, you see a comment there, like, "Oh, the 3 rings being created first." But I'm gonna be real with you. The order of the rings and their creation are only in the unfinished tales in the Silmarillion. It's not mentioned in the Lord of the Rings. The only actual reference to it is the ring poem at the start, which mentions the 3 elven rings first. Now, the whole thing is it really doesn't change the outcome of the story. The story is still the same. These rings are being doled out to the different races of Middle Earth, but it makes it more my opinion, a little more true to the source, where it's like, now we see how the remnants of Morgoth are passed down into Sauron. His idea of control and order is still not something he could create on his own. He has to rely on others and bastardize their ideas and manipulate it in order for him to make his ends meet. So like that.
Well, and also, Belmont, it's the more of the creation of, okay, not Sauron's as the elves, and then a little bit more of Sauron, and then a little, and then it's all of Sauron. Like, he is the soul. Like, he is like, yes, Celebrimbor plays a huge part in creating them, but Sauron puts a lot of himself into
pouring
these games
himself
as well.
And by the end, he pours himself
rings
into the
from
one ring,
men
and there's
will
nothing left.
And eventually have some more of his influence in making them. And
Well,
then
and so do the
ring
dwarves.
it's forged. The one ring was forged in Mount Doom, not Eregion, right?
And the Cracks of Doom.
Yep, and it's he. I think it's said in the book. He stabs himself. Like, that's why when you see in maybe that's a movie. That's a movie thing, right?
Yeah, so there's, I think, a unreleased scene where he does that. But in the books, the whole idea is the 3 elven rings are created last, and then he creates the one. So they create these great powerful rings, and Sauron, in order to control the others, which he's used his craft and talked to Celebrimbor, pours all of his malice and his own power into the ring, and it amplifies this effect and allows him to take control of everyone wearing other rings. So when he puts the one ring on, the elven rings realize immediately that Sauron is trying to control their minds, and they take the rings off. And this is what pisses him off more than anything. He's like, you are going against my plan. We work together. We were going to save Middle Earth. We were going to bring order here. Give me the rings. And that's what he tells Celebrimbor. He's like, give me all the rings and tell me where the 3 are. And then he attacks Eregion.
So, yeah, so I honestly don't have a problem with how they were made. So it is what it is. It's a minor change, but really it's not that. If you have to if your gripe is that the elven rings were created first, I think the show is doing a pretty good job.
I think, and like, dude, I read these books all the time. I read them all the time, and I know it's going to bother a lot of people. But unless someone brings up a good argument as to why they should have kept this order, like, by all means, because if you're willing to introduce 16 to 17 people wearing different elven rings, all being elves from different areas, go ahead, because like that's the whole point of the Second Age and why Tolkien made it. They are annals of history, not full-blown told stories like we hear in Beren and Luthien in the First Age or in the Third Age with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So it's okay if like some orders change and if all the facts aren't like 100% there, as long as the outcome is still what if we were to retell these stories later on, that they could really say the same exact thing that they are in Lord of the Rings, that Celebrimbor and Anatar worked and created these rings to dominate the free people of Middle Earth, and then the One Ring was created, which is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to create all the rings first, and the One Ring finally.
Yeah, and in the show we still have 9, 10 rings to make, right?
Yes. He's
we have more. We have 16 rings to make. We're going to see the 7th
I guess the dwarf
first.
rings aren't technically made yet. They're
being
made right now.
Yeah, they're being made right now. So, in moving from the dwarf and the Eregion standpoint, we'll kind of end it with Numenor, because I think Numenor has a lot of the biggest questions. Oh, not the biggest questions, but it's got a lot. That's where a lot of our political intrigue is. Because
they didn't make a
Pharazôn
mistake.
They made
a huge mistake. In Numenor, the writing. They have an accent over the U. It should be they have like the caret. It's supposed to be an accent. So it's like huge thing. I got pointed out by some other creator I saw. I would have never noticed.
look, see, same thing about the rings being created. If we're complaining about the wrong thing,
see, there's plenty.
And
plenty to complain about.
like Pharazôn, and here's the thing. I think the most interesting character in the Numenor Numenor storyline is the daughter. Is Anarion, or not Anarion? Earion. And the way you don't know how her story is going to end is so interesting, because in the first season they show us that she's an architect. So that leads me to believe, oh, she's probably going to build such and such and help her brothers build Minas Arnor or Minas Ithil. But one can't be true and the other can be true at the same time, because I feel like she's a goner, and I feel like what she did with the Seeing Stone in exposing all of of what Miriel and her father and the Numenorian kings before them had been working towards, and she is helping Pharazôn. And it's crazy to think that a child of Elendil the Great, Elendil the Faithful, Elendil the Tall would go against his wishes. Not even his wishes, but his character. You know what I mean?
And I want to point this out. I know a lot of people complain about certain aspects of the show, ring order, what have you, etc. But what they did to the Seeing Stone is so
Yeah.
heinous to me that like that's the biggest thing. And Numenor is like, if people were like, Pete Belmont, what's your specialty in Lord of the Rings? They'd probably say the Second Age of Numenor, because I love the Second Age. I talk about it all the time. But what they did to those Seeing Stones made no sense to me. Like, through Elendil, it was like, you know, all sorts of weird stuff, trying to say it had more power than it should have. That bothered me a little bit. But Eärien and her character, it feels really appropriate to the vibe that is Numenor at this point. You know, in the books, it's been, you know, thousands of years since they've existed. They've been around since the Second Age of like 32, I think the year is. At that point, when Numenor falls, it's like 3200. So it's like, you know, there's a lot of history to cover and a lot of ways they need to represent it. And so they condense this timeline. They have someone like Eärien, a made up character who's not in the books, really represent this change in the people of Numenor, where, you know, at first she has this relationship with her brother, and now that her brother's gone, she's completely gone the opposite side of things, and she blames her father for it completely. I really enjoyed that. Just not the Seeing Stone. That shit was wild. All right?
Does Numenor like have a Palantir, like at all?
Yes.
So yeah, they do.
They have seven. These
they
stones
have
are created
seven.
by Feanor, and there's the Master Stone, and that's on Avalone. It's this elven island right outside Valinor, Tola Erusea. But the seven other stones are, you know, they're in the possession of the faithful, the people who live in Andunier, who is Elendil and his family. So they take the seven Seeing Stones along with the Stone of Eric, which, if you know what that is, it's this giant like 6-foot orb. I don't know how they got it onto a fucking ship, but they somehow did. But bring all this shit over to Middle Earth. They're like, this is our treasures. We bring them all over. So all like the treasures of like the Line of Kings is saved fairly, because they're an offshoot of the Line of Kings. The Lords of Andunier are an offshoot from one of the fifth king of Numenor named Tar Lendil. His daughter marries this dude named Elatal, who ends up having a child, Valandil, who you probably recognize their name, and who was the first Lord of Andunier.
Yeah.
Because I do like the political unrest and unease of Numenor in this season. Because like Pharazôn was a character that like
is it. Sorry. Part of Art of Tim is reminding me that the stone on Avalone is one of the seven. Sorry.
Yeah, but like Pharazôn in season 1 was like a character that I felt you could see go either way. It's like, this guy's going to either screw everything up, or he could kind of save things in a way. And obviously he's going down this path where he's going to screw everything up. But one of the things like that I really did like was the scene when they're in the Queen's, I would just say dressing room, and he's like, white or crimson. And they're fighting over, or not fighting, they're arguing over what
they're
color.
having a word like back and forth,
and he is trying to convince her to go with this color that would represent the future of Numenor. And when she walks out in this beautiful white gown, and you're like, okay, so
I saw that in person. It is as immaculate as you think it is. It is stunning.
That's
dude.
awesome. But what I loved was, okay, you see her coming out in this beautiful gown. It's great, and it's doing it, and then you see Pharazôn and this crimson, like blood crimson.
So disrespectful, man.
And I'm like,
and I love how they said they're cousins,
which is accurate.
Which is true. They are cousins in the books too.
They are cousins. Yeah, and it's very accurate to how this all goes down. And we won't spoil it, but it's very, 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 very true to what is to what Tolkien talks about in the Fall of Numenor. I mean, we're jumping about 2,000 years, Pete? 2,000 years from when it falls.
Yeah, the War of Aragon happens in 1700, the Second Age. The Fall of Numenor is around 3,200. So it's a huge amount of time they condensed in the story.
Yeah.
Don't worry, not a lot happens.
But I do like how they have kind of shown just how deified certain political figures can become. Like when the eagle lands upon the that outcropping of that room, and Pharazôn is in front of it, and people see I'm gonna try and not make real world comparisons, but there's some very real world comparisons in that scene.
Which is
Yeah.
Where
that's
it
that was kind
is
of the point.
the camera looking up at Pharazôn with the eagle behind him, and showing that he is what is going to bring Numenor its greatness, despite him having very questionable
Ethics.
ethics is one of them, but I would say
Okay.
motivations and
Yeah. He's
it's
not
just-
great. There's a reason why I don't like him, Chase.
Oh,
There's a reason
no,
why
I
I
don't.
called him a
He's a bad
motherfucker
guy,
all of the
but
first season.
I don't know the actor's name, but the guy who's playing him is
Oh,
incredible.
he does
Tristan.
great job.
He's
Fantastic.
so
I forget his last name.
good.
Tristan knows his first name.
Because like at the scene when they're all in that little tavern, the outdoor tavern, and they're all
Oh, that
they're
was so with
conspiring.
Valandio and everything and Kevin.
And just the way he handled that situation and the way he like he wasn't boisterous about it. He wasn't like trying to, it was just like, oh, this is so good.
Very Palpatine-esque, if you think about it. He's
And
gonna let he's gonna let
more
others do his
suave.
fighting
He's
for him.
far more suave and understanding. And
Yes.
when I see someone, I can see how the townspeople and the citizens of Numenor would follow behind Pharazôn. I understand why they want to follow him. With someone like Palpatine in Star Wars, there is almost this like, this dude's way too mustache twirly for anyone to follow him. What are you guys
Dude,
doing?
it's so funny. It's
It's like
it
is funny, but
dude.
yeah, Pharazôn
No,
is such an interesting political figure and so interesting for the story. And you kind of see of like, it's not that people hate the queen or I guess the queen regent. It's just that there are concerns. There are genuine, and again, there's so much freaking parallel to what we're going through right now, or what we just went through a month ago. It's like people are concerned that this person is just unfit, physically unfit, mentally unfit to do this. They seem bloodthirsty going after this war in Middle Earth that a lot of people of Numenor feel like is none of their business. And then all of a sudden you have this person that is like, hey, we owe nothing to the elves. The elves are in our past. We are Numenor. Yep. We are strong. Make Numenor great again.
It's a lot. And there's stuff with Numenor I wish they did a little differently, but the eagle at the coronation was probably my second or first top moment of the first 3 episodes.
Oh, absolutely. And the way they hinted at it during that conversation of earlier, like, oh, wouldn't it be grand if a great eagle made its presence? And what does it do? Makes its presence. But everybody mistakes it for Pharazôn when in reality it is Miriel. Because for those that have read The Fall of Numenor that have read the Silmarillion, Miriel's line is part of the faithful, which Elendil is part of. And the Eagles are very much in cahoots with the Valar. And the Valar in Pharazôn is not for the Valar. He is very much against them. He wants to go back, just like Chase was saying, why aren't we allowed to go to Valinor? We should rule Valinor. And that's what ends up bringing the downfall of the Númenóreans, because he gets greedy. He goes, why are men so destined to never touch to never step foot on the grounds of the holy of holy Valinor?
Chase said it really well, actually, talking about the elves and the dwarves and the idea of immortality, because that's what the Númenóreans are upset about.
Yep.
The Númenóreans are gifted with like thrice the life of a normal man, and the line of kings is like 4 or 5 times that. Like the first king, who is the brother of Elrond, the twin brother Elros, lives to be like 500 years old, and he's a man. So it's like some wild shit like that. But as time has gone on, their line has dwindled because they've mingled with lesser Númenóreans. The line is not living as long as it used to be. And after Tanamir the Unwilling, they start gripping the life. They want to live longer, because it was always known that the kings went on their own accord. They're like, dude, I'm old now. like, I will
Yep,
close my
I'm
eyes.
out.
They just
Peace.
shut down. They like auto shut down. They're like, I'll see you. After that, they like start really clinging on to life into the last moments of and like being in like almost senile at times. And so with the eagle, though, the eagle is this huge representation because, like Luke said, it is the representation of the Valar. Manwë is the Lord of the Skies, King of the Valar, and King of Arda. The eagles are his eyes and his witness. So that mountain behind that you see, that, you know, the statue of the guy with the bird that's supposed to be Eredil Armenelos, that mountain back there is the Metal Tarnima, the pillars of heaven. It was raised up there as being a holy place for the Númenóreans to pray to this one god, the Eru Ilúvatar. And the eagles would always show up there as a witness to it. They would perch on the western portion and watch them do it. But also, eagles would eyrie in the king's tower of Armenelos. So an eagle showing up there is huge because there hasn't been an eagle for some time because they turned their ways on the, like, you know, the faithful, being faithful and following the band of the Valar to never go west, never want more, to never seek immortality, to be happy with what's been given to them. And I love it. It's like, holy shit. Okay, we're getting into this now. Let's go.
One thing about the eagle scene, and I thought it was a great scene, but the one thing I noticed, like, that eagle just looked like it was looking for food, and they didn't have any food. And it just fucked off.
Yeah, there's that too. It's like, bro, I used to come here all the time.
Like blinking, looking around, like, no food. All right, see ya.
Yeah, later.
Númenor has like sheepland called Emery. That's just like tons of sheepland. He was probably eating well. I'm just gonna throw that out. Yeah, giant eagle.
No, for sure,
But no, I thought it was a great scene. But that, like, it popped in my head. Like that eagle doesn't look like it's trying to start a political riot. That eagle looks like it's hungry. And
he's like through his back. He's like, "Yo, man, I don't want no part of this." He started chanting Pharazôn. He's like, "This is weird." He like got out of there.
I think that was a great scene overall. I think that when the Númenóreans spoke up against the queen, I think the queen had an incredible response. Like, I think
the same response that she had when she got slapped in the face.
Yeah,
she knows the pain and the suffering that the Númenóreans are going through.
Was there,
and she was there. She's witnessed it, and Pharazôn just happens to turn that on its head.
Yeah, and again, I think it's an incredible scene. I think it's incredibly well shot. I think just the way they framed everything. I think just kind of having, you know, you kind of have the camera behind the queen and you see just this massive people, and there's a little bit of unrest in there. And then obviously the eagle comes in. And again, that shot of the camera looking up at Pharazôn with the eagle behind him is just like, snap that photo. You got your propaganda poster right there.
Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh my gosh.
It's
one last thing about the eagle, though, and it's completely unrelated to the more political side, is the accuracy to the drawing that Tolkien did himself.
Of
The Hobbit. It is identical to it. And that was like a really fun thing. I love it a lot. Completely unrelated.
I mean, that's cool stuff to know. And it's cool to know that, like, and this is my thing with every, you know, adaptation, is that I do believe that 99% of adaptations do have a certain amount of love and care put into them, no matter how they're received by their audiences. Like, someone obviously cared enough, I think even in season 1, there's stuff in there that only someone who really cared about Lord of the Rings would put in there. And it seems like season 2, they want to put more in. They want to reward people like you and Luke who have really invested into this universe, and they want to feed you. You know, they fed you a little bit, and you guys said, well, hey, we're hungry for more, and they're trying to give you that. And so I think it's cool to hear these things that have, like, yeah, this is something that Tolkien drew and we brought it to life. I think it's in the same way that we see in Star Wars with Rebels, with Ralph McQuarrie's drawings coming to life. Like stuff like that. It's like, it is not super impactful to the story. It's not going to make or break the show, but it's these things that I think it is showing the people who care that the people who are making it also care.
And
there's a lot more trust in these creators and designers and producers.
Well, and it's also with Bear McCreary. We also haven't talked about Bear, and this will be the last kind of thing because we'll wrap this up. But like, Bear literally needs to do everything. Him and the guy who does Game of Thrones need to do Star Wars. And I mean, Bear McCreary actually did do Star Wars. He did he did a thing for Knights of the Old Republic. So he's been in the Star Wars space. I think they need to get him on everything. That man, he's live on Instagram right now.
Say what you will about Rings of Power. but does it have probably one of the greatest TV soundtracks ever? Yes.
Yeah.
By far.
Absolutely. Oh my god.
Even just the opening theme and I think how they've done the opening theme with the sand and the speakers in both seasons, like it's, you know, it's funny because they could just Game of Thrones it and just give us a map of Middle Earth and show us and it's cool because they did it with the Expanse.
Towers Rising, you know.
Yeah. The Expanse has a cool one where you start to see like where the factions are growing and stuff like that, and they're showing us where places have fallen, and like that's cool. Game of Thrones did it, Expanse did it. They're very connected.
The opening song is actually Howard Shore.
Yeah, Howard Shore
did that one. Yeah, and that whole sand thing that you said is real.
It's actual.
Yeah. That I knew was like almost 99% practical. Like there's a few things that they do digital, but like that's all sand and speakers and magnets. So yeah, I think it's cool. I'm glad they brought it back, and I'm glad like it's cool that there's a red tint to it now to change it. That looks really good.
And the gold lettering is now like tarnished a little, you know, it's like worn down.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a lot to this show, like season 1 and now definitely season 2, that I'm just like, there's like, I go back to taking my roommate to see Rise of Skywalker in the theaters. And I was like, are you ready to watch the worst movie ever made according to the internet? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And then credits roll and he's like, why is everyone so mad about that? and then same thing with Rings of Power. And I'm like, sure, we can point out things that could be better. We could point out things that maybe messed with the lore in a way that we didn't appreciate as much. But like, I have watched TV shows before that I'm like, this is not worth episode 2.
Like I hate to say it, but I watched that Wheel of Time and I tried. I watched the whole first season. I read those books.
I've had multiple people try to get me into Wheel of Time, and I've never even
I can't do it. It was just weird because I'm all into Tolkien. I'm all into George R. R. Martin. I'm into fantasy.
George R. R. Martin's another person. You read his blog, he's so pissed off about the House of Dragons. I think it brings this whole conversation full circle because you brought up like how, you know, an author, there are times you have to recognize the adaptation and stands on its own. Well, George R. R. Martin doesn't believe that. He's like, you guys changed so much in Game of Thrones. Look how that turned out. I want my say in House of Dragons.
Do you want my take on that?
Go write The Winds of Winter.
You that yes, and you also gave up the rights.
That's exactly it.
And when you give up the rights, you basically let people do whatever they want with your baby. It's not necessarily your story anymore.
Okay, I am not a Game of Thrones person. I'm gonna throw that out there. I watched season 1 through 4 and I loved it. They killed my favorite character, and I was like, well, there's no point in watching the show anymore. So see you later, Game of Thrones. Tywin Lannister, greatest character in fiction. It's just one of those things that like, in seeing like through the grapevine, because like people like JJ and Bale and Josh, who are very into Game of Thrones and have really good points, but I get leaked this Game of Thrones stuff every once in a while just because of them, and I'm just like, do you guys forget the cultural phenomenon that Game of Thrones was?
Yes.
Like everyone watched that show.
Yeah.
Who talks about that show anymore?
I'm not like joking. I went to like a friend's house and like their little brother had like done the Game of Thrones logo, like font in chalk in their driveway. And and I was like, this is insane. Like how invested people are with this.
And to be honest, this is if it weren't for Game of Thrones, we wouldn't have Rings of Power.
If it weren't for Game of Thrones, we wouldn't have a large percentage of the TV we have today.
Exactly.
And people wouldn't be willing. And I will say that I do think that people have taken the Game of Thrones kill every character to make you feel like you're on edge all the time to an extreme.
Yes.
Where it's just like, I'm like, dude, you're just going to kill people and then people will lose interest the same way that like I did. And I know like there's people that I've talked to that like, I fell off in season 5 or season 6 because the character I really liked died. And I had no more investment in it. And it's like that literal double-edged sword of that storytelling thing. But that's the way that I think people have, like, showrunners have been like, hey, we don't actually have to have these these characters you feel like will never die. Like there can always be stakes and risk, and I think that's great. I think the way that shows have evolved since Game of Thrones can't be understated. I understand that a lot of people that read the books were very disappointed with how the show ended, and that's fine. But at the same time, those books aren't finished.
Yeah, agreed. And that's my biggest gripe with George R. R. Martin is that he hasn't finished the story, and I won't read those books until Winds of Winter and a Sword of Storms or summer or spring is starts with an S. It's for spring. Or I don't know.
The one thing to maybe bring it back to Lord of the Rings that I did see someone talk about, and it's not that like you can't get you can definitely you can have adaptations and you can be okay or not okay with those adaptations. That's your personal taste. The one thing someone brought up that was different between someone like George R. R. Martin or George Lucas was they are alive and can talk about the properties and how they are being handled. Tolkien cannot.
Tolkien's been dead since 1971.
And there is a feeling, and look,
pretty wild considering 1 ring, 9 for men, 7 for dwarves, 3 for elves.
And Christopher Tolkien's been dead since 2020 or 2019.
2019.
But the other thing for that is like, yes, there is a sense of, hey, messing with Lord of the Rings lore because that person is no longer alive. And I think a lot of people have had the same thing with Frank Herbert with Dune, is that he is no longer alive to talk. But the thing is, Dune has been handled pretty well. And very few people are all that upset about it. We'll see how it goes when Dune goes off the wall and how they adapt that to film.
Look, I'm gonna say it right now. Peter Jackson's trilogy is considered as one of the greatest fantasy trilogies of all time, and that is about 40% of that book.
Yeah,
I remember I saw that trilogy in theaters, and I loved it because my dad was a big Lord of the Rings person.
And he probably walked up being like, "What the hell?"
No, he loved them. He loved them. But I remember the backlash, in early internet forums.
Well,
Christopher said
did not like those movies.
Christopher straight up said, "My father would have thought this was an abomination."
They're action films. They're action films.
Big for its own movies or its own books. So he's just washed his hands of the whole thing.
When I read Lord of the Rings, when I read Fellowship, I was like, this is so insanely different from the movie. Like just the tone, the overall tone.
That's a horror book, actually. Just throwing that out there. It's a horror food blog book, if you didn't know.
and musical. It's a musical as well.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
We just gotta bring up. All right. Anyway, let's wrap this
I think that the adaptations. I think that the adaptations we are getting, I think with Lord of the Rings, I think with Dune, stuff like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, I think we're getting really good adaptations overall. There's things in all of these franchises where I'm like, I can't believe they didn't include this, or I can't believe they changed that. And again, not being a Lord of the Rings person, I'm enjoying 100% being on the outside and just like watching it, enjoying that show for what it was, and then coming online with like you guys and other people and be like, oh yeah, this character is connected to X, Y, and Z, or here's the lineage of this location and how important it is to everything else. We're like, oh, you like this character from the trilogy, here's how we're going to connect it. And I think that's great. I think it's a fun way for me to personally experience this show. It is. I think coming on here is great because then I can seem way smarter than I am to my girlfriend. And she's like, who's that character? I'm like, oh, yes. Well, you see, in the first there was 17 Punabills, and they...
Anyway.
So I think it's great. I'm having a fantastic time with this show.
But that's all that matters. People on the inside who read these books are also having a fantastic time with this.
That's great because I thoroughly enjoyed season 1, and the response to season 1, I feel, was very in line with a lot of Marvel Star Wars. It was a lot of woke garbage reaction to that. And it's so immature and unintellectual. But I am glad that some of the legitimate complaints and criticisms of the show in season 1 that I'm just pretty much oblivious to, outside of like actual show stuff, like the dialogue is better. The characters feel better.
Yeah.
The sets feel better, a little more lived in.
Yeah. Exactly.
and it's like, I'm like, there were like when they went to the village, and I'm like, that road doesn't look like it's ever been walked on ever. Uh, and I think it's
you don't need to read the Silmarillion to enjoy these
No, you
books on the
don't.
show. Not at
It
all.
enhances that. It enhances your your viewing a little bit, but like, and I said this even with season 1. For someone that like, if you don't read the books, you could watch season 1 of Rings of Power and be fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's the
I
best
did,
part.
and I loved it. I loved it, and I like to see that the show is getting better.
Yep.
I like to see that we're no longer. I think Nick brought it up earlier. Is that not that every episode was like this, but it was like you got 10 minutes with each set of characters, and there would be like this really crescendo of thing that was about to happen. It would cut away to make sure you're like, hey, don't forget about the dwarves, or hey, don't forget about the Harfoots. And now we're getting these longer chunks of time where we're going to have an episode that is basically half about the dwarves, and then we're going to cut to
Numenor.
Numenor or where the
Lindon.
Southlands were, and see how the humans are
Mordor.
doing down there. And I mean, we didn't even talk about the girl with the thing, and she burned her.
Yeah,
thing.
we didn't. There was a lot. There was a lot that we didn't talk about. But
I knew there was something up with her, and then when she pulled her hair,
We didn't even
burned-
mention
yeah,
the
that's
ends
rough.
at the end. Like we had ends.
Oh,
and
It's just. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but like there's a lot going on.
I think
in the
it's a
show.
good
There's
thing.
lot
I think
to
there's a
enjoy.
lot. There's a lot about this show, and
but they're
there's-
giving it time. They're giving it the respectful time. Hour
Yep.
16 for the first episode, hour and 6 minutes for the second episode, an hour and 10 for the third episode. You need to have an hour plus of this show.
I don't.
the only way that
I
you can
agree
do
and
it.
disagree, because this was when we were talking about the Acolyte. It was coming out. The number one complaint about the Acolyte that we always
Is
had
the
was
length.
these need to be longer,
Exactly.
or they need to fill the time they are giving us with better and more concrete stuff. I think that having an hour and 16 minute episode is fine. I would anytime anyone says anything about we need more episodes, I would say go watch Chernobyl and tell me you think that show needs to be more than 6 episodes long. Like
Yeah,
it
or
is
take-
not
perfect
it is
example is
not a
Shogun.
number that fixes the show. It is what
Shogun
you
was
fill
well
the time
done.
with.
The episodes were perfectly paced. The show in itself was start to finish, could stand on its own outside of anything else. And you know, one thing that on the opposite side of MCU has caused is this idea of these interconnected like stories and constantly looking for Easter eggs. And I do love it as a fan for Lord of the Rings, someone coming into the show who is looking for maybe those deeper references or looking to get inspired to read these books might get off put by just these random drops of textual ruins or knowledge that you find in these books.
It's very much what we talked about, you know, kind of at the beginning in this episode, and it's kind of how I feel about how the original trilogy of Star Wars is like they are saying stuff that you have no idea what he's talking about. The Clone Wars, what are the Clone Wars? We get 7 seasons out of that eventually. And there's these things that are established that they're bringing up, like there's names, there's locations, there's events that are being talked about in this show that I'm just like way over my head. And it's one of those things, it is inviting me in to explore more. It is giving me a beautiful room to walk around in. And then they are opening doors for me to walk through if I want to. Like if I want to learn more about the Eldar, if I want to learn more about the spirituality of the elves and the history they have, if I want to learn more about the kingdom of Numenor, I have an outlet to do that if I want to, but I can also stay in this room and have an incredible time in this room because they're filling this room with awesome stuff. And I think what they're doing with the time they are doing it, and again, an hour is not a short amount of time. It's like when Haley and I were watching this, we were watching about 2 episodes a night, because if I finish work at 7 or 8, we're going to finish these 2 episodes at 10 or 11, depending on what we do. Like that's a lot of time to occupy just watching media. I think that 8 episodes at an hour each is great for this, because we got a lot of lore to cover. There's a lot of characters we're dealing with, and I think that's great. And I think a show like The Acolyte would have benefited with an hour-long episode filled with interesting things to explore. And I think a lot of shows could do that. I don't think adding 16 episodes is going to fix any show. Like I said, I think Chernobyl is the perfect example of that. You don't need an insane number of episodes to make a good season. I think there we go.
All right. Well,
and I think what they're doing with the time they have, with the hour that they have, or like the 50 minutes, I think episode 2 was, or something like that. Like, it was well filled. I want to see what's happening next, but I'm also not confused about what's going on. I know the motives of the characters and I want to see where they're going to go. I obviously know how it ends up. The rings get made and all hell breaks loose.
You'll see. Let me tell you something. There may be a Lord of the Ring. Who knows? I don't know.
I forget what episode it was, but we were like,
I've never seen these.
They said it both. They said both in the same episode in the same paragraph.
Yeah, I was like, I was watching. I was like, they did the thing.
They did the thing. They did the thing again.
But the Anatar scene was insane. That's just ending it on that.
Him becoming Anatar was great because I think when he, we'll wrap it up, I swear. But like, he walks in and he's saying this outlandish tale about like, I'm no mortal, and Celebrimbor is like, I bet, and then he disappears, and then you just hear the voice
starts crying.
Celebrimbor
like, is crying. He's like,
and it's like it's not, everyone says show me, don't tell me, and they did both. They showed you the power that he has, and he's telling you the power at the same time. And that's why I hate the argument, show me, don't tell me, because no one actually means it when they say it. They showed us and told us his power at the same time. And he emerges as Anatar, and just his aura behind the fire shows the immense power that he has. And we've already seen it. We saw sexy Black Tendril Sauron before. It's still hot.
Oh, Lord.
Tendril Sauron's so hot right now.
Dude, like, you hear those bones cracking, you're like, my back is a little stiff. Come here, Sauron.
Oh my God.
But the way that Anatar presents himself when he comes out, or when Sauron comes out as Anatar, there is power in his stance. There's power in what's behind him, and there's power in how he went from Halbrand, this dirty human, to this immaculate being that demands power. And it's like, it's camera work, it's audio work, it's his acting, it's the effects, it's all of this culminating into this, like, this is such an important character, and this is such an important moment in this story. And it's just these things that, even as not a Lord of the Rings expert, I'm just like, this is incredible. You feel it. This is good television. This is good storytelling.
Absolutely.
But Pete, let's wrap up the thoughts. How are we feeling, and where can we find you on the internet?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling really good. I can't wait to see the next episode. I'm one of those individuals who loves everything about Lord of the Rings, so Tommy B as much as anything else. But you can find me on most social media. You can find us at Voices of Arda. We're a YouTube channel. We're a podcast, as well as a community now, where we've invited a lot of different creators to come and post their videos on YouTube and trying to do more group events. I'm one of those individuals. My name is Belmont. I go by BE1 Mont _LOTR, Lord of the Rings. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and so forth.
So I've been meaning to ask you, are you a Castlevania fan? Is this where?
That is why I call it. Because I used to speed run the games all the time, and that was like my jam. So
I was a Resident Evil speedrunner. I've never beat Symphony of the Night. I have that disc somewhere, but like, I always did like the Castlevania games growing up. But
there's so much.
It's good to know. It's good to know you did speedrunning. I was a marathon Resident Evil speedrunner. I was terrible.
That's awesome.
I did an Extra Life 24-hour stream where I beat every single Resident Evil game in 24 hours.
Around Halloween, I usually like run through most of the main titles of Castlevania and be like, I'll just play through them, nothing like speed running, but I beat them in like 2 hours.
Okay, did you like? Okay, I'm not going to ask you about Castlevania 64, but I know there is a small fan base for Castlevania 64, but
there is Legacy of Darkness.
Yeah, the PS2 games, I know a lot of people are very divisive.
Oh, Lament of Innocence is one of my favorite games of all time. Okay. Leon Belmont, one of my favorite games of all time.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Anyway.
we'll have to when we're back on. We'll talk more about Castlevania because I haven't seen the Netflix series and I hear only good things about it.
I was thinking about maybe this is something you guys would be interested in. They're going to come out with another season of it, but I was thinking about doing a rewatch of the original, like the first anime, if you wanted to watch it around Halloween.
Done. Because we're also working with Grandmaster Bale. We're watching a bunch of scary movies now to get a bunch of stuff out. We watched Alien because Alien Romulus came out. We're gonna watch The Conjuring next, and then I've got a whole list of movies we'll watch with him.
You have John Carpenter's The Thing on there.
It is.
When you watch that, you let me know. That is my favorite horror movie of all time.
I'm gonna be on One with the Films in November talking about The Thing as well, because it is Alien is my like favorite film of all time outside of like Star Wars, and it's definitely my favorite horror film. But The Thing, I love the 1980 thing or 84, whatever it was. Incredible movie, but.
A lot of time.
More to come in October. It seems like definitely down to watch Castlevania, and more scary films. I'll shoot you the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
And anything you want to hop on, and you're more than welcome to. But Luke, we're finally wrapping up. We're making it under 2 hours.
Yeah, good thing we don't have to edit this.
And what do you have coming up?
You can find me at Jedi Master Eggs, and you can find me here every Thursday night for our watch party with Voices of Arda, with Belmont and Cali Cosplay and New Beta Do Beta whenever he has available time. But we will be doing a live stream tomorrow for the 4th episode, and then we will be doing another live stream. So you get 3 straight days of Lord of the Rings content. Good for you guys. And we'll be breaking down the episode with some special guests on Friday night. There'll be more posts on that soon to come. But yeah, thanks guys so much for joining.
Thanks for having
Chase,
me.
where can the good people follow you?
You can always find me on TikTok, mostly at Forward Into the Black. Occasionally I'll hop on lives with some people, and very rarely I'll hop on Twitch to do some streaming. But you can find me here at the Pod Ones when we're doing Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and eventually some scary movie. And 100% down to watch Castlevania seasons 1 and 2 to get ready for season 3. But we will be watching scary movies and posting content in October to get Grandmaster Bale, the sweet baby boy from the UK who's never really watched a scary movie in his life. And then on Saturday, you can find myself and our other co-host, Harith Productions, talking about the new game Star Wars Outlaws with Pep, or Element 7 from Diet and the Force. We'll be talking about our thoughts on the game as we've gone through it.
Element 7.
And he's a great guy. Can't say enough nice things about
big
that.
Tolkien fan. He worked for.
He did work on Lord of the Rings Online for years.
Guilty pleasure. I play Lord of the Rings Online all the time with my friends. It's just
I still play Star Wars Galaxies. Don't feel bad.
I wish I could. I just it's a lot to try to balance.
There's a lot of people that I know that have that guilty pleasure MMO, and like, dude, it is the worst game ever made. I will never stop playing it.
Yeah.
But again, thanks to everyone in the chat for chatting with us and definitely helping out with some of the lore involved with Rings of Power. I'm very excited for tomorrow to watch the new episode and to see where this show goes. I'm having a great time. I hope everyone else is enjoying it and giving constructive and positive feedback and not worrying about the skin color of the elves. But that'll wrap it up today for our little recap of the Rings of Power. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next week, and also tomorrow, and also every day. Content every day.
One ring to rule them all, one podcast to bind them. Bam. I got our outro, baby.
Live, ring, and prosper.
Oh my God.